Whether it's the not-so-friendly US-Russian diplomatic relations or Russian leaders' obsession with poisoning dissidents, there's a couple of things that haven't changed since 1991. However, despite these constants, it's still been 30 years since the Soviet Union collapsed. Pretty strange to think about, considering that my parents lived through the moments I learned about in my history class. And those moments I learned about in world history have real impacts on society in the 21st century. And it is therefore crucial to evaluate how the fall of the Soviet Union remains a relevant topic for discussion at both the dinner table and at international summits. Today, we will be diving into the aftermath of the collapse of the USSR. First, by examining how formerly Soviet nations are doing today, and then by looking at the rest of the world 30 years later. Russian President Vladimir Putin has often described the Soviet Union's demise as the greatest geopolitical catastrophe of the century. And for Soviet nations, it seems to have turned out this way. Let's take a look at Russia, for example. Ever since the fall of the USSR, political climate and diplomatic relations in Russia have been increasingly tense. The once massive, unified Soviet Empire has evolved into a nation of corrupt officials and a scramble for power at the Kremlin level. Russia's revenge-driven desire to regain power and become a world power once again all comes back to that fateful year where Russia lost years' worth of power. But it isn't just Russia that has been struggling with post-imperial conflicts. Countries in the Eastern Bloc in general had diverse cultural backgrounds and always struggle to fit into the single, all-dominating label of Soviet Union. And so, since 1991, each of these nations has been looking for a national identity and a sense of belonging. Yet, these conflict-triggering ideas of language, borders, and culture continue to haunt these countries. The fight for a deeper grasp on national identity has caused ongoing conflicts to flare up, such as the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict between the former Soviet nations of Armenia and Azerbaijan. And it doesn't stop at political and cultural and ethnic conflicts. It's economic as well. Economic struggles for Soviet nations have redefined the word disastrous. Russia, for example, has been quickly trying to get from communism to capitalism, and along the way developed an economy characterized by stagnation and decline. So clearly, formerly Soviet nations are still attempting to grapple with the aftermath of the death of an empire. But it isn't always pretty. But it really isn't just Eastern nations that are overwhelmed by change and chaos. The rest of the world has felt the echoes of post-imperialism as well, but not in such a negative way. For example, the United States and Russia emerged as rivaling world powers after World War II. But the demise of the USSR made the US emerge as the almighty world power. And that legacy still stands today. Non-democratic nations have felt the rippling effects of 1991 as well. China has exploded, expanded, and become a world superpower today, on its way to surpassing the United States. The European Union has been able to expand its influence to places that were once under absolute Soviet control, a pretty big accomplishment. And while these nations have all been trying to keep Russian control at bay, it seems like Russia's internal conflicts are the ones preventing it from re-emerging as a global force of power. And yes, continuously poisoning dissidents counts as an internal conflict. Yet 30 years later, a pandemic has devastated country after country. Yet, even with bigger issues at hand, we still managed to remember the demise of the Soviet Union in 1991, the year that left its mark on the world. the year that simply cannot be forgotten. Thank you.